here for introductions. We'd like to acknowledge the lands on which we reside and host this event. So we invite all attendees to take a moment to reflect on the traditional territory on which you reside, wherever you're joining from. As we are hosting this event virtually from the Toronto area, the City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewas, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. As visitors to these lands, we honor, recognize, and respect the Indigenous peoples' longstanding presence in this territory. We acknowledge that this recognition is key in moving towards reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Good morning, everyone. My name is Patsy Coyle, and I'm joined by Sharon Tomasis and Bianca Bond from Ontario Sport Network. And today we'd like to welcome you to Women in Sport Leadership edition of OSN Sport Speak series. We're excited. Our topic and panelists for today are fitting, given tomorrow we are celebrating International Women's Day. Before we get started and introduce our host for this morning, we'd like to take a moment and thank all of you for attending, as we've had an overwhelming amount of interest for this event, and the turnout has been really great to see. So thank you again so much for taking the time to join us this morning. We hope that you enjoy our panel and discussion over the next hour and a half as we hear from an amazing group of women. With that said, let's get started. We're excited to announce our host this morning, Kayla Marie Tracy, who you all know very well. She's a very popular journalist and anchor and reporter for Canada's #1 breaking news channel, CP24. I'm sure it's on everyone's TV 24/7. Here in Toronto, Kayla has an extensive background in both sport as an athlete and reporter. Just to name a few, she's covered the 2016 Grey Cup, the very famous 2019 NBA championships, the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympics, and has also excelled as both an amateur and pro volleyball player in the US, Jamaica, and Philippines. There's so much more that we can say about her personally and professionally, but we'll let Kayla share a little bit more about herself. And it's such an honor to have you today with us. And we will turn it over to you to get started.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a great morning, and I hope that this is about to be, something that just gets everyone's day off on the right track. And I'm so happy to be able to host and really lead this great conversation we're about to have with this power panel. So just to get some housekeeping items out of the way first, that we will leave the chat open throughout the panel discussion. And so that way you can feel free to enter your questions there, and we'll get to them throughout towards the end of the conversation. And we're also going to leave an open mic question period. So we want this to be as interactive as possible, giving the panelists the opportunity to pass their knowledge on as well as their advice. And if perhaps you may be a bit shy or you want to use the anonymous question system, we also have that set up as well if you want to use that method. And we will add the link to that as well in the chat below. And lastly, we also have a few OSN swag bags that we will raffle off at the end of today's event. So listen out for your name, and then we will wrap up everything. But I guess just a little bit about myself before we introduce the panel. As you heard there, I am a very strong supporter and proponent of the game of sport. When it comes to women in sports, I think that it is such a special thing to be able to host events like this, but also to share a bit of my story and why and how sport really has led me to where I am today. And I really truly believe that I wouldn't be the woman that I am, standing in front of you today without the opportunities that sport, and specifically in my case, volleyball, afforded me. I grew up in the East End of Toronto in Scarborough, Ontario. And from there, I was introduced to a variety of sports, but it was really volleyball that caught my attention and my love for the game. And I was very grateful that I had coaches around me at part of my life where they believed in me and they planted seeds in my head where they were like, hey, you know that you can use the game of volleyball to excel your education. And from there, I was able to get a volleyball scholarship to a small university in the United States. And from there, it just led to so many other opportunities, to the point where I also realized that I had a passion for journalism and for broadcasting and for connecting with people and communications. But fast forward to this day, I think that a lot of the things, when I look back on my young adult years as a teenager and as a professional, all of the things that I learned on the volleyball court, all of the things that I learned in the locker room, the experiences, the connections, the relationships, it all has helped now in the professional realm. And I think that I am as confident as I am as strong as I am as resilient as I am, because of sports, because of the things that you learn throughout it. And so to be able to be where I am today and to look back, I think it's so important to be able to introduce young girls to whatever sport they so choose, whatever piques their interest. And I think that you can't say enough about what it does holistically. And that's regardless of whatever field you choose to get into at the end of the day. So that's just a little tidbit about myself. I'm sure that we will, get more into it throughout the day. But right now, I would love to talk more about our all-star panel that we have lined up for this morning. So let's begin with the introductions. First off, we have Michelle O'Keefe. Now, Michelle O'Keefe has been with Niagara College in Welland, Ontario for over 4 years, serving in the role as athletic director. Now, in May of 2022, her portfolio was reconfigured to director athletics as well as student engagement. And prior to resuming this role in her hometown, Michelle was the president and CEO of Canada Basketball. Now, she has also been a member of the FIBA Central Board since 2014. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Kayla Marie.
All right, up next, we have Debbie Lowe. Now, Debbie has been the president and CEO of the Canadian Sport Institute on Ontario since 2005 and has established Ontario as a leader in high performance sport across the country. Now, she has served as the executive director of Parasport Ontario and director of sport for Toronto's 2008 Olympic bid. She has also worked for the Ontario government in the former Ministry of Tourism and Recreation within the Multi-Sport Games unit. Now, Debbie has also been the chef de mission for the 2008 Beijing Paralympic Games and the assistant chef de mission for the 2004 Athens Paralympic Games. She is the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal and was previously named as one of the top 20 most influential women in sport in Canada by the Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you, Kayla.
Our third panelist member is Anita Camella. Now, Anita holds the position of Senior Director of Facilities Development at Tennis Canada, leading facility development at both the grassroots as well as high performance level across the country. Now, with over 2 decades of sport and recreation experience, she has sat on numerous federal and provincial sport committees, as well as held positions, multiple sport development positions within the government of Ontario. Now, she has also served as on the mission team for Team Canada at the Commonwealth and Paralympic Games and has chaired Tennis Canada's Equality Strategy Committee, developing strategy to enhance opportunities for women and girls in the world of sports. Let's say good morning to Anita.
Good morning.
And last but certainly not least, we have Fran Ryder. Now, Fran has made a substantial impact on the growth and development of the modern game of female ice hockey. Now, she's been involved in the game for over 50 years and is currently the president and CEO of the Ontario Women's Hockey Association. Now, among many of her other accolades, both as a player as well as a volunteer, she has been inducted into the International Ice Hockey Federation Hall of Fame and was awarded both the Order of Canada and Order of Ontario. Now, Fran has lobbied for decades now to open up the game of hockey to women and to provide them with equal opportunities for competition, as well as continuing to impact the sport both locally and internationally. Now, she has been instrumental in the establishment of Women's World Hockey Championships and acceptance of the sport in the Olympic Games. Fran, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Kayla.
Okay, so Lots to digest. We're here in March. This is Women's Month. The conversation as far as women deserving to be more seen and heard in the world of sports is not a new conversation, obviously. I think each of you, as I just noted with your resumes, have been in this for a very, very long time, and you have been proponents of this for a very long time. But women continue to make gains within the sport industry, but research by women in sport have found that about 40% of women in sports industry say that they have faced discrimination because of their sex. So it's time to change that narrative a bit. And that's what we're hoping to do simply by having more discussion like we are this morning. So I'll say first and foremost, let's start off with each of your stories. You obviously have outstanding resumes within the sport industry here in Ontario and across the country. But really, I guess, start at the very beginning, how your path started, and what kind of challenges did you, I'm sure maybe that's a very open-ended question. Maybe let's just start off where your stories began, because I'm sure there's plenty of obstacles that have happened throughout your journeys. But let's start off at the very beginning, your journey, what got you into your particular sport, and when you found that passion. Fran, since you're up on my main screen, we'll begin with you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And welcome everybody to this panel, and thanks to the staff for putting this together. Basically, I grew up loving hockey and a tremendous fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs when they actually did win Stanley Cups. And I had a passion for the game of hockey, but women weren't allowed to play. And I wasn't aware that women had played in past years, but it just wasn't for them. And then there was an article in the Toronto Telegram in 1967 about the Brampton tournament, contacted them, signed up, and started playing. And I got put on a team immediately. And there was three things I noticed. One was everybody welcomed you and wanted you to play. There was a seven-year-old, I was 16, and a 44-year-old in our team, and it was one team. The second thing is the top players were absolutely amazing. I watched some of the players at the higher levels, and it was incredible. And what an eye-opener and how good they were. And number three, how poorly we got treated as people. We were ridiculed, we were mocked, we were called incredible names, and it just seemed so unfair. All we wanted to do was play the game of hockey, and it was quite an eye-opener. So I started volunteering and worked on various teams, leagues, associations, and really learned how important it was to have a strong network of support around you, because that's what keeps you going, and how important it is to really follow your dreams, believe in your dreams. And I didn't believe in myself, but some other people did, and that really gave the strength to really push for women's hockey in the World Championships and the Olympics, because clearly people I highly respected told me point blank, stop what you're doing. It will never happen in your lifetime for the Worlds, and Olympics will never be in a winter sport for women's hockey. But, we had learned the players in Canada, US, and around the world were very, very strong. And because they came together, we couldn't do a world championship. But, we regrouped. Same thing as like until the last pitch is thrown a baseball game, you're still in the game. So we regrouped at a world tournament in 1987. The players from so many countries contributed so much to that, and that caught the eye of the world. And now we have 44 countries recognizing women's hockey. They told us, you got to develop grassroots first. Well, grassroots, we need role models, and the grassroots clearly built role models. And now we see opportunities for young girls in these countries where they struggle to go to school, they struggle to have opportunity. They're getting strength as people through their participation in hockey and other sports. And so it's just very, very thrilled to be part of a team, and the battle continues, but we're certainly there for a values-based right reason. Thank you.
Fran, you've been in this for such a long time, and just such a strong proponent of it. You deserve your flowers, because I know that just thinking about the very beginning, when you probably first entered that entire realm, just the pushback that was there. I mean, obviously there continues to be pushback even in 2023, but I'm sure that it has been quite the journey. So thank you. Michelle.
Oh, thanks. I grew up in Niagara, in Welland specifically, and I'm tall. And so when I was in grade 6,
How tall?
6 feet. I wasn't 6 feet in grade 6, but
You get that early growth spurt, I'm sure. I was 5'10" by the time I was in 7th grade, so I feel your pain.
Yeah, it wasn't too far off. And so there was a program starting at my elementary school, and I joined, and I started to make friends. And that's what kept me into it. And it's one of the things that I think is so valuable of team sports for girls, is that you make friends. You've got a circle of people who will always defend you or support you. And it's usually unrelenting, and people, it's, for me, it was really important because people make fun of you when you're tall, and they call you all kinds of silly girl names and whatever, but it is what it is. So fast forward through high school, I went to university, played on a really strong university program in Quebec, won a national championship, which it puts you in a different conversation when you're listening to people talk about sport. I had no idea what sport administration was when I went through university. I didn't study it. I had no interest in it. I didn't even know what it was. But a friend's little sister did. She had her eye on that prize, and I just watched her go through her university career and then get jobs in sport. And as a matter of fact, in 1996, she recruited me. She was at Canada Basketball. Sorry, 1994. She was at Canada Basketball, and Canada was hosting the Men's World Cup for FIBA. And so she, I don't want to say lured me, that just sounds wrong. She pulled me into that world, and I never looked back. At that time, I was a little older than most people would be when they were taking on a minimum wage job for a 2-month contract. But I thought to myself, if I don't try this, I'll never know what could be. And I always look back on that with shock, because I can't believe I had the confidence to do that. And fast forward, I rose through the ranks and left and came back a couple of times from Canada Basketball. But when I left 4.5 years ago, I was the president and CEO and had been in that seat for a couple of years. And so I think for me, and watching women in sports, especially sport leadership, there are so many opportunities and doors that are starting to open. I think to your question or your comment earlier, Kayla, there's all kinds of problems still, but at least we can get at that table and have those conversations most of the time. And if you can't get at that table, we now know that there are ways to make people listen to you. So I'm grateful for this panel today, because I've worked with Debbie and Fran and Anita for a long time, and have recently got to know Patsy and Sharon and Bianca, and this is a strong group of women. We cover many generations and decades of sport, and just seeing some of the names of the people in the room today, this is fun. This is great. This is a great conversation. And I look forward to the rest of the time.
Thank you. We'll hand it over to Anita.
Well, I'll start by saying I was short. But I did grow up in sport, loved it, was kind of a multi-sport dabbler. And that was great. My parents were kind enough to put me in everything. So that was a lot of fun. I was led by an older brother who was a pure artist. So I didn't have any example or anything. So I would say my story really stems, from turning a negative to a positive. So not a proponent of negative sport experiences, but I was heavily involved in sport all through elementary school and in high school. Really wanted to take a focus, and our school had rules on how many sport teams you could belong to. We actually had all of our phys ed teachers, 3 of them were women, so that was very cool. And I was placed in a phys ed class with one woman whose focus was getting home exactly when the bell rung, and needed to catch up on very specific soap operas and TV programs, and made that known. So I thought, how could I have spent, at that point, my whole life in sport and benefiting from sport, and then have this kind of experience. So what do I need to do to turn it? So I was hell bent on, creating teams that didn't exist and working with the diversity of all the girls that I had the pleasure of playing on multiple teams for. And we just went past it at the school, and they gave us some space to do it. We created a swim team where there wasn't one, and it was a lot of fun. So I would say we took that negative, made it a positive, and then I decided I wanted to be a phys ed teacher because I wanted to do the exact opposite of the woman that was leading my experience. And so that was the lesson I want to share today. Was I went through, I've done a Bachelor of Education, a Master's in Education, and I never taught because I spent my whole high school and summers teaching sport camps. And by the time I was finished, I thought, I don't want to teach. I want to go out and pursue my passion in sport and not teach, apply it elsewhere. So from that, I would say, follow your passion, no matter what your educational background is, build your network, follow your passion, and continue to grow. And the one thing I think the mantra I always use is, learn it, know it, make it your own, and then move on. As a woman in sport, we need you in a diversity of roles. So keep giving back and keep learning and passing on, and then moving on so you can, continue to challenge yourself.
I like that. I like that a lot. Anita, thanks. And we have Debbie.
Thank you, Kayla. So good morning, everyone. So I grew up actually in downtown Toronto, and for my background, I am half Asian. So my dad is Chinese and French Canadian. So grew up in a strong household of females because I had 6 sisters, and my mom, of course, and then even our dog was female. So back then when I was growing up, we got kicked out of the house for the day, find out what you do, come back when when the street lights come back on. So I spent my, childhood really growing up in playgrounds and playing sport the whole time. So like Anita was saying, did a lot of sport teams. So I was really good at all sports, but I did not excel in anything. So I did truly want to be an Olympian. And so when I found, when I didn't sort of go down that path, what I really wanted to do is help Olympians and Paralympians on their journey. One thing that I would say, so when I did take phys ed at U of T, and there is one course that really stood out to me. I did a course in people with disabilities. And so from then I went to work also at Variety Village Sport Training Center, which focuses on people with disabilities. And, it's just sometimes finding that one lesson or that one passion that can really help your career and just provide some direction. And that was a pivotal moment for me because I found that it was something I loved doing. I loved working with athletes with disability. Ended up on the CPC board, and as you mentioned, Kayla was the chef de mission and assistant chef with the Paralympic team, and still continue to make sure that Paralympic athletes, and in particular female Paralympic athletes who have Paralympians, many challenges, certainly with something that here we really believe in making that equal opportunity for everyone. So, my thought is that make sure, if you can have one, really just pay attention, and there could just be one thing that can really change that moment for you in your life. So, which is what the whole area of people with disabilities has done for me.
That's actually a great lead up to my next question, because the 2023 theme for International Women's Day is embracing equity. So what is your vision of embracing equity in the sport industry as well as the sports sector as a whole? So yeah, Fran, I'll let you
go with a friend. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. It's important to note there's 2 things. There's girls and women in sport, and there's girls and women's sports. And I think both are very, very important, but there is a distinct difference. And we certainly need to provide opportunities for women in every aspect of the game. And oftentimes it's important to note that women don't have the confidence to step forward, and it's important to pull them out, bring them out, and really encourage them and show them you believe in them to come into the coaching role or some of those other roles. That's a very important aspect to get them in the game. And it's really important that they have roles in the game, also at the administrative level. The other thing is for the women's sports and women's events, they need the credibility. And it's sometimes deemed that women play in the women's sports because they're not good enough to play in the co-ed events or the co-ed sports, and that's wrong. It's important to embrace and provide equity for the female events and female sports as well, so that the girls and women that choose to play in those venues do have the equity they require. And certainly the media is way behind in our opinion in that field, and we need to do everything we can to provide equity of facility use, opportunities, and financial support. And certainly we've seen recently the success of the women's soccer, the women's rugby, the women's golf, and the women's hockey, and the strength of those women's voices are very, very powerful in Canada and some other countries. And they're having, I think, a big impact on the other sports. And the other thing is, as sports groups, we need to work closer together and make sure that, we're supporting the athlete, we're supporting the person, because as long as a person gets involved in something to enrich their lives, that's a success for all of us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, great points, Fran, and really, hopefully we're at that point where we don't even have to have this conversation anymore, but great strides have been made, as we know. So, all those little, all of those milestones and all of those targets that we set are still really important, right? To make sure we strive for equal females on boards, equal pay, all of those things that we know we have to do, making sure that they're part of the organization's policies and principles. Otherwise, they don't happen and we won't make these strides. So just ensuring that we're all working together. Fran, you said it well in terms of working better together as a network. And that is, the whole point of OSN is to be able to share all of these experiences and opportunities with the sector. And, hopefully they can count on us. We have an amazing group of leaders leading the organization with Bianca, Sharon, and Patsy. So, reach out if anyone has any questions to any of us. So we're here to help.
Anita?
Yeah. To build on my colleagues here, I would say embracing equity is really about embracing change and the willingness to change and embracing openness. And I say that because, we're in sport and sport has evolved, right? So I feel like sometimes we say, oh, we're doing equity now. So we're good. We're doing equity now. Well, if you're running track in 1990, you said you were doing fast then. Well, you're doing fast differently now, right? So we've evolved. Our equipment has evolved. Our understanding of the environment in which we compete has evolved. Everything has evolved, but we don't go back and say, oh, there was just one point in time where we did fast. So there shouldn't be one point in time where we do equity. So as we learn, we grow, we evolve, we do better. Our younger generation of girls and women come, and they let us know, what, you think you're doing equity, you're not. Here's what else you need to do. So I think embracing equity means embracing the diversity of the whole team that we have around us and the openness to change.
I recently became a new mom. I have a toddler. She's just over 1 year old. And I think about that, I think about how I embraced and how I was able to experience sport at my age, but what that's going to look like for my daughter's generation, right? And, how we're embracing equity right now versus how it's going to look in 10, 15, 20 years. Are we still going to have this teetering slope, or are we going to finally find some balance? So no, that's a great point. Michelle?
There's not much to add from what my colleagues have said, but I'll just take a little bit of a twist and think about the word embracing. Embracing is a very inclusive type of word that in my mind, it brings energy, it brings collaboration. And I think to what Anita just said, you can't, it's not a checklist. Okay, today we've done equity, tomorrow we're going to do diversity, next week we're going to do run faster. It all has to be integrated in our everyday lives. So from my perspective, I try to be as positive as I can on most days. Doesn't always work, but and so to me, embracing equity is you do it with a smile on your face, even when they're trying to shut the door, you still are there and you're like, hey, still here. All right, let's go. But it's the embracing part, I think, that I'd like us to think about, in that it is the accepting of a new normal, and it's not a special occasion. It's always and every day.
Yeah, I think I really like that idea of it not being a checkbox, something to just get off the list, something that organizations can say, okay, we've done it for March, and let's just go back to business for the rest of the year. So
International Women's Day, check.
Right, exactly. It has to be more. It can't just be something that is on a checklist. So this next question is for Anita and Fran. And that's coming from a provincial and national sport organization perspective. What are the key factors contributing to gender equality in your respective sport organizations? Whoever wants to.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go first then. The Ontario Women's Hockey Association is unique in the world of sport. It was formed in 1975, and it's because it's a network of province-wide people 100% dedicated to the growth and development of the women's game. We've been able to have a huge impact provincially, nationally, and internationally on the game. Key to remember that our core values are most important, and the physical and mental health of the individual prior to them being an athlete is equally important to us. And that's what's driven us through our entire history and continues to drive us. And our philosophy is also to keep things simple and fair across the province. There's vast differences in this province and the different geography, and empower the people at the grassroots to do what they need. We're not dealing with a can of paint that has a specific formula to make it work. We're dealing with people who are different. And sometimes you need to vary a little bit within the fairness scope to make sure that people are treated as best they can be. So that's our general philosophy as a provincial governing body. We do struggle with equitable treatment at the provincial and national level in hockey, and we continue to battle that, and will continue to battle that. We faced a lot of challenges, especially as women in a women's sport, and it's important that some change happens for the future. But the key thing is, empowerment. It's important that when people empower women, when people empower people in women's sport, that they are empowering. They're not saying, I'll let you do what I allow you to do when I let you do that. Empowerment is respecting the differences, embracing the differences, and recognizing the fact that we can all be stronger when people that bring a different strengths to the table are empowered to do what they do best and learn from them. And that's a critical point in the whole gender spectrum here of how we're going to provide equity and fairness going forward.
Thank you, Fran. Anita.
Sure. Just sharing, being at Tennis Canada, I will say it's an incredible national sport organization, and that it's fairly progressive. I think we have a great growth mindset. And we also have the benefit of being, across all stages and ages of athlete development, right up into the pros. You'll see fairly balanced as far as women and men competitors. So we have that as an opportunity, but it's also, it can serve us in a negative way, in that we can get, a little complacent and say, oh, we're pretty balanced, we're good. So I think the organization has taken, certainly over the last 5 years, a real opportunity to step back, assess what we don't know, learn what we don't know, dig into our own data, and truly see how many of our officials are women, how many of our coaches are women. At what levels? What are the draws like in our tournaments? Because, this is this beautiful thing. We all say, oh, we provided equal opportunity to men and women, but only 5 women showed up for this tournament and, 28 men showed up. Oh, okay. Well, did we follow up on that? Right? Why did we fail? What outreach did we do, incorrectly? Or where are we not going to get these women? So we had the opportunity to create an internal committee, and with an incredible team of women across the organization in all departments. And it was a lot of fun. We learned a lot. And, one of the recommendations was we can't just be a mouthpiece on this. We actually need to have someone dedicated to this work and to really change our organizational culture. So one of the key factors that we did was, we looked at our data ourselves, our own data, our research. We looked internally at where we had strengths and where our weaknesses were. And then we learned that we're going to have to, create opportunities internally to fix this before we go out and espouse, wonderful equity strategies and opportunities for our provincial and territorial partners and our community clubs. So I will say one of the key factors was understanding our own data, our research, really taking that learning curve to a different level to understand what our organization was about. And then we actually have brought someone in, and we have a director focused on this now. That's not their only role. It's not a check mark now that we have the director, put them in an office and we're good to go. Now the work goes across the organization, filters to all our partners, and she will be releasing a strategy. So it's exciting.
That's definitely exciting. And good on you all for acknowledging and realizing that, hey, this is something that we need. And this is a role that we need to fill. So that's great. At the very beginning of this morning, I did talk about challenges, but then I sort of said, we'll get into that in just the beginning, because I'm sure that there are plenty. But because each of you, have been doing what you have been doing in your respective field, in your respective sports for as long as you have, I have no doubt that you have come across many a roadblock, many a challenge. And I'm sure even many moments where maybe you contemplated staying in your role. So I do want to, sort of pivot and talk about challenges and roadblocks that not only women in sport, but women in leadership continue to face. But not just leave it there, though, if you don't mind sharing with us, a situation where you had a challenge in front of you, but how you also persevered through or past that situation. Because obviously we're all on this conversation today, and you're still standing, you're still going strong. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about challenges and perseverance for a moment, because that's obviously part of the game in any game that you play. And yeah, I'd love to hear an example, because I know that there's multiple cases. Like, we've all had our fair share of challenges, but what's something that comes to mind for each of you in your careers, or even maybe perhaps like even, your time as an athlete, that you had a situation that presented itself and that you were able to overcome? Debbie, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Kayla. Yeah, I'm thinking of this one particular moment that, so it was a staff, I had been in the CEO role it wasn't for very long. It was only a couple of years at the time. And there was one staff who particularly was challenging my expertise, basically saying that, what do I know about high performance sport? And, who is I to be leading this organization? And you do start to have these self-doubts, right? Meanwhile, my board has selected me. I've, been the chef. You've done, I sit on a couple of boards and committees at all time, always looking at gaps that I have and making sure I do professional development to fill those. But someone says that straight to you, you really start to have these self-doubts about yourself and your skills. And, was he right? So yeah, that's still, as I said, that was quite a while ago now, but still sticks out to me quite a bit. And at the time we had a female board chair who was amazing. And, she really has become a mentor. She still is a mentor. She's not our chair anymore. She's still a mentor to me. So, really helped me work through that. But yeah, that was a tough one for sure.
Yeah, I think, oftentimes too, there's no, when you're in a situation or when you're in a room or a field in which you may be the only one, you almost have to learn to adapt and put on a show. Like you said, you received that news and you had to act obviously as if that didn't get to you, but it did. And, there is that issue of imposter syndrome that so many women fight on a constant basis, even though it is absolutely ridiculous, but it is that voice in our head sometimes that makes us second guess. And I really wish that, more, I like this question because we're talking about women who have been in their industries for as long as they have, and that they still feel this way. So whoever's on the line this morning and is listening and may be thinking that it's just a me thing, it's not.
The imposter syndrome is real, right?
It's real.
Yeah, certainly. I think we've all had our fair share of that. Anita, what's the situation that comes to your mind?
It was an interesting one because often it's the elephant in the room that we usually don't talk about. And in this case, the person, and it was a superior that I was speaking with, just threw it right out on the table. So we were just having a one-on-one. I was early in a position and basically said, and could have checked my HR records, but I guess decided just to throw it right on the table. How old are you? Are you married? And will you be having children?
You didn't waste no time. Me just said, you know what?
Straight up, right? And I was like, wow, okay. So, and knowing the organization and knowing there's incredible women in the organization doing just super things, I thought, wow, this is a good start. So I gave my age, no problem. And we laugh about it now. Like my partner and I, we don't have kids. And I've said to him all the time, he's like, what if you didn't decide to have kids, but we don't. And he has kids. So we laugh about it now, but I just said at the time, I was like, I don't know. And I truly didn't know. Right.
Yeah.
But I pretty much knew. But I just thought, you know what? It's my right to say, I don't know. I'm going to say I don't know. And I really think that threw him off because it's like, okay, how could you be in this position and like not have your life together enough to know whether you're going to have kids or not? So I loved the response. I wasn't ready for it myself, but I will say often that's an elephant in the room. And it's come at me so many other times. Usually it comes in a much, more passive aggressive way, subversive. So how are your kids? Or do you like kids? Or, but I really found that interesting because I think it is a barrier for women that you need to get to, you need to cross, and you need to decide what's right for you, your family. And there is no career, not one on this earth, that can't be done no matter what you choose.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I've had a similar conversation, but the person that I had the conversation with wasn't as bold as the individual that you had. But and it's laughable because I mean, show me a man that has had that conversation with a higher up. But
Exactly.
I digress. Fran.
Wow. Where would I begin? There are so many, and I guess my goal is to try and be part of the lobby to make the next generation women not have to face some of the adversity that I faced and I saw other women in the game face. And I guess, one would stand out is after the success with the World Tournament, I was invited as a guest of West German and IHF Federation to attend the European Championships to talk to the IHF board and a marketing arm about women's hockey. And there was a movement from Hockey Canada to stop me from going. And I didn't understand why. And it surprised me. I thought, now that we've got this, we're going to be working as a team to collectively grow the women's game. Regardless, I ended up going and had great conversations and was very, very positive about the country and everything going on. And there was an incredible enthusiasm. The German crowds were incredible. The support of the women's game was incredible. That was a qualifier for the World Championships. And the IHF board and their marketing arm were incredibly enthusiastic about the opportunities in the women's game. So I never did understand why, but it all worked out in the end because we had the opportunities to dialogue about women's hockey.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the chat going on right now as we're talking, and Katrina says, love hearing all of your origin stories for why you got into this space. It's no surprise they're all connected to playing sport growing up. A big reason why continuing to accelerate sport participation across Ontario is so important. Wholeheartedly agree with that, Katrina. Michelle.
I've got a couple of little notes just written down based on what everybody else said. I don't have children either. Sport is my baby. I feel such an affinity to and a responsibility to making sure that there are opportunities for girls and women, that's where I spend my time. Imposter syndrome. I remember reading Sheryl Sandberg's book about Facebook and how she started to describe imposter syndrome. And I was like, it's not just me. And because that is real.
Yes.
The other syndrome that I find interesting is the tall poppy syndrome. And I think Steph Sutton wrote it in the chat about people don't like it when other people are successful because they always think they can do better. And I expect more of women, quite frankly. I know quite often you'll see women tear down other women. Do better. That is not good enough. As for in my professional career, I mean, I could give a million different things, but I think the one that sticks out in my mind is when I was a CEO at Canada Basketball, so many people, including women, would say, oh, are you the CEO of women's basketball? No, I am the CEO of basketball in Canada. And they were, oh, the men too? Come on. Like, that's just ridiculous. So all the women on this call, do better.
But you know what? I want to follow up with that point, Michelle, because I've thought that too. This idea that, unfortunately, that some women out there simply aren't part of this movement or this idea of that we should be empowering each other. And I think, though, I kind of started to think, is it because that's how they really truly are? Or is it because we're in such a state that we've been taught there's only enough room for one of us, maybe two of us. So therefore, when you see one who's reached a pinnacle or a level of status, that you feel as if there's not enough space for all of us, because that's just how society has made it seem. And so we try. And so instead of being like, wait, you mean there's more room for all of us, that we can be here? If there could be more than one of us at one time. I think that's sort of, unfortunately, that's where the mindset derives from, because we're so used to having so little women, so little representation, that we almost fight for the few spots that are there. And it's a hard mentality to switch.
That's sad.
Yeah.
I know. Okay. I'm loving this conversation. All right, so this next question is for everyone. What are your respective organizations doing to pave the way for the next generation of not only top female athletes, coaches, and officials, but also sport business professionals? Who would like to take it away?
I can jump in.
Okay, go ahead, Anita.
All right. On the top is make space. Just make the space. So if that's making space on your board, making space in your policies, reflect on what they say, and do they create barriers? Make space in your programs, make space in your communications and marketing. Like one of the comments I made earlier, it's, we're banging our heads, why aren't girls showing up? Well, maybe you're not portraying it in a really exciting way that would make them want to come, to this program, to this event, to this tournament. So I would honestly say, I think that one of the big ones is make space, make it welcoming, make it inclusive, make it diverse, make that space, and show people you're serious about making that space and keeping that space.
Debbie, I saw you were about to chime in as well. Go ahead.
I'm going to focus on the sport business professionals. So our organization is made up of 50 staff, and about 30 of those are sports scientists. So not a typical career that women go into. I know some of my team are on the call today, but so we really try and support our sports scientists. So there is a national organization called Women in Sports Science that On the Podium has. So we really try to promote as many of our team and our staff to be part of that. We have an EDIA committee. So really focused on training and education of our staff. Nita talked about some gaps and making room, making sure that we're doing all of that, and really having that sort of culture of acceptance here, and everybody knowing that that they can put projects forward. For example, I had one staff member who wanted to put a grant application into Canadian Women in Sport to start up an Iranian sports group. So she was actually successful in that grant, and feel very proud that she felt she could come and ask us to be part of that. So I think it's that culture piece and making sure that we're there. Everyone in the organization who is a female, can provide that mentorship and leadership role.
You touched on like the cultural part as well. And I guess to add a bit of a tidbit onto this is I'm even just thinking about, how I was growing up. And I think that, we're saying, well, why aren't girls, as interested or what's stopping them from, continuing on when they're introduced to sports? Something also that comes to my mind is, what do parents or grandparents of, of this generation, how do they feel about sports? Like, are they pushing, are they leaning into to young girls and saying, try these things? Personally, I grew up in a multicultural background. I'm Filipino and Jamaican, and I grew up with my Filipino grandparents. They really didn't care whether or not I, was interested in playing sports, because they were like, no, you need to focus on education. You need to focus on your schoolwork. But I was like, but I really love basketball at the time. I was like, I really want to play this. And I remember having to beg for their support, as opposed to being like, oh, sure, you have this interest in basketball. Absolutely. Let's put you, So I guess what I'm saying is, sometimes how do we sort of get parents or guardians to also understand how important that by their young girls and their daughters, and by them being interested in these sports things outside of the classroom is so beneficial in the long run for their holistic well-being and how they continue to grow. Michelle or Fran, I don't know if anyone wants to chime in on that.
I've got an answer for you that tends to lean towards the next question, so I'm going to hold off a little bit. But what I would say is, I find quite often women need to be invited. They might want to participate with something, but if they have a very busy life or they have a very busy family, they might just sit back until you tap them on the shoulder and say, hi, come on in through this door. There's lots of room for you to grow. And then they embrace it. I find quite often, and maybe it's a basketball thing, but I don't know. But I find often women will sit back until you invite them in.
Fran?
I agree with Michelle totally, and the parent segment is quite a challenge, especially with the pressures we're finding. The parents and people are more stressed now that we're coming out of COVID. We're continuing to do everything we can to focus on physical and mental health, but we also really promote provincially and through our local associations the importance of the person. When you play house league, you're an equal person. You're choosing to do whatever you want to do. And some of the incredible business leaders we have now as women, because they've participated in sports, it can't be overstated. It's incredible how smart some of these kids are, how they do the management. And we again need to, I think, emphasize all components of sport, competitive and recreational, as such a valuable part of life.
Yeah. Andrea in the chat says, love this. I sit on our local girls hockey board. We need to increase the presence of women. So this kind of leads right in, as Michelle noted, it leads into our next question, and it is for Michelle and Debbie. How are you or your organizations keeping girls and young women interested in the sport? And there's no doubt that that's definitely a challenge, I think, across the board, right? You could do all of the things, but ultimately, if the interest, if the spark isn't quite there, we know more than ever that young girls are the ones that drop out of sport at a extremely higher rate than young boys by the time they reach high school. So what are some things that your organizations are trying to do to keep that interest high?
I'm chomping, Deb. Can I go first?
I know, I can see you are, so you absolutely go, Michelle.
I've got two examples. I still sit on the FIBA Central Board and the FIBA Americas Board. And in the Americas, we have our first ever female president. Her name is Carol Callan. She's from the US. And when Carol came in, I had already been on this board. She was new. She became the president. We're like, okay, what are we going to do? It's the first time I've had another female on the executive of the Americas with me. So 4 years ago, we started this program. We call it Adelante, which in Spanish kind of means let's go. And it's intended for young women who work in the federations of the Americas. So South America, Central, North. And in year one, which we started during the pandemic when everybody was pivoting and moving on to Zoom, we scheduled speakers every Monday night. And we had speakers come and give some information or professional development to our team of women. We probably had about 35 women who were consistently committed to Monday nights, and we had some wicked speakers. This year, as we're in Adelante 2.0, we might have 20 people and we might get 5 of them. So now that we're out of the Zoom world on a regular basis, the women who are participating in this program are less committed, which I think is an interesting observation. One of the reasons we started this group, aside from the obvious that you want to give professional development to young women, especially in Latin America, where they find it really difficult to get any traction. The previous Secretary General of FIBA said once, when we were questioning him on why there aren't more women at the board level at FIBA, he said, well, who are they? What women do you want me to move up here? I don't know them. So we're like, okay, we're going to make sure you know. But he's no longer in that seat, and the current Secretary General is much more open. So that's one example. The second one I want to tell you about is here in Welland. There was a home builder company that made a deal with the city to get rid of some of the red tape. They contributed to building an outdoor sport complex, the Empire Sport Complex. And there's beach volleyball and basketball and tennis and pickleball. And it's a really cool environment. It's right beside the canal, which is where the Flatwater Center is, if anyone's ever been here for canoe kayak. So the city was asking me for some input on court sizes, that sort of stuff, and I'm thrilled to help. And I asked them, once it opens, can I have that facility for a day? Because we all know boys are going to be out there from dawn till dusk. You're going to have to call them home, and the girls won't want to go out and play because they won't know how. They'll be intimidated by the boys. So we started an event last summer, or last fall, as it turned out, a very sexy marketing name, Welland Girls Sports Day. And if anybody has any suggestions for a new title, I'm wide open. But anyway, what we did was we invited girls under the age of 12 to come and play at this park for the day. Jumpstart supported us. They gave us all sorts of equipment. So at the end of the day, the girls got to take home a piece of sporting equipment with them so that they would have it with with them at all times if they ever wanted to play. Here at Niagara College, we had the student council came out and did a barbecue for them. We had our coaches and athletes and community coaches come out and lead the technical side of it. They all got bucket hats. I mean, we just had such a great day. And we got postponed so many times. We literally did it in the middle of October on a cold, rainy, windy day. We had 179 girls register and 175 girls stayed all day. And they loved it. They were leaving, okay, we'll see you next year. And the little brothers were like, when's Boys Day? And I'm like, every day is Boys Day. So what I'm excited about that day in particular is that it took a lot of organizing time, but the looks on their faces through the day and the fact that we know we've already got everybody committed, we're doing it again in June this year. To someone's point in the chat, I think it was Katrina, that you've got to introduce it to them and they've got to be able to see it. And it was funny, Anita, I don't know if I told you this, the most popular sporting equipment that day was the tennis racket. All of the tennis rackets went because they all said they had a basketball, they had a soccer ball, they didn't need those anymore, but nobody had a tennis racket. So the 40 tennis rackets went really fast.
I love that. Okay, well, this question is for the whole panel, and it kind of, it's a follow-up really to what we were just talking about. And this one is fueled by stats. Now, research has been done that girls who have participated in sport have a dropout rate of about 1 in 3. So I mentioned earlier, I didn't quite know the exact number, but here we go. So 1 in 3 by late adolescence compared to boys that have a dropout rate of 1 in 10. So what is the sports sector doing to address this, or what does the sports sector need to do? And I think that what Michelle just mentioned is an excellent example of that, right? Having a day where any uncertainty or shyness or just whatever they may be thinking as far as not being able to have this space. And like she said, 175 young girls were introduced to a sport, and hopefully it's going to be even more than 175 for this year. So what do you think are some things that can be done, whether it's more on a grassroots level or on a larger span level, to kind of bridge that gap from 1 in 3 to 1 in 10? That's open to anyone on the panel if anyone wants to answer.
I'll jump quickly.
Go ahead.
I would say consider our approach, right? I think we sport is very much something that's passed down. So we learn from what's been passed down to us, and that includes sport administration. So not just our skills and tactics and strategies and techniques, but also our sport admin. So if it has been passed down, we often are in a place where this is what we've always done, and it's working okay, and this is what we'll always do. But if we're seeing those kind of stats, and such huge barriers for girls, we need to perhaps approach it differently. And that's using boys as well. Let's change the boys, but also let's really address these severe barriers for girls. So use the men in our organizations as allies, use all the women as our allies, bring everyone together and really start to understand the approach. So if we acknowledge a failure, we put a program out there, 3 girls signed up. Don't just say it didn't work and walk away. Dig deep, peel it back. Why didn't it work? And we know Canadian Women and Girls has a stat that 75% of girls interviewed in their research actually said that sport leaders could do better to effectively serve them. So there's something missing in how we effectively serve the girls. So, and each of us are in different sports. It's a great sport diversity on this call. We have different cultures, different approaches, but let's look at within our own organizations, what could we do better? I think in Tennis Canada, we've had to peel back that onion and understand where are we failing? Why aren't we getting to that reach and getting the numbers we want to see? So we're exploring it from a programmatic standpoint, from a coach's standpoint, having more visible women coaches, if you can see it, you can be it. And making sure we have women across the board and not just in supportive positions always.
I think you also have to talk to the girls to find out why they're leaving and not staying. One of the things we did on Girls' Day was we have a hairstyling program here at the college, and we had all those students come out and show the girls how to do their hair when playing sports. They loved it. That was the most popular station going. But you know what? That helped them feel comfortable that, oh, I want to get my hair done, but I'm going to still play sports. So they can be comfortable in who they want to be and still play sport. But you have to talk to them, and one size does not fit all. Boys play sport in a different way, and you got to tweak it for girls if that's what they want.
You know what, that's so true, Michelle, because and this is a true story. I still remember I had a friend of mine growing up. She was one of my teammates on my basketball team. She shied away from no longer playing, and she was great. Like, she wasn't a bad athlete by any means. She shied away because she had terrible cramps once a month, and didn't know like how to balance, how do I play when it's that time of the month, and all of and it actually pushed her away. And like, looking back, like how sad is that? But that's like, that right there is a perfect example of like of things that need to be talked about more. Like, hey, it's okay to still, get on the court, get on the field, whatever it is, during the time of month, and we'll walk, and it's those things that maybe we're not saying it out loud, but some of these young girls just need to hear it, like you said. Or something as simple as, oh, well, I have like really long hair, or I don't think my, all of these things. It's really small, simple things, but like you said, it can go a long way into their confidence in being able to play a sport.
I coached basketball with a gentleman once. And one of the girls, they were high school girls, and this girl came in and her shorts were up to her armpits and her ponytail was over here, and she was obviously disheveled. And as a female I knew what her challenge was that day, and she was completely out of it. And this male coach, just kept screaming at her and screaming at her and screaming at her, thinking he was eventually going to get through to her. I pulled him aside. I said, look at her. Do you see something different? He's like, yeah, she's out of it today. Why do you suppose? And I'm like, take a real look. You live with women. Do you not think that maybe she's got a little monthly challenge going on? And he was like, oh, how would I know that? I wouldn't know that. And I'm like, just don't be an ass. Don't scream at her just because she's obviously struggling. That doesn't help.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's small little things that I think, especially when we're talking about young girls, right? Because you really have, when you think about it, we have this small window to introduce young girls to sport, whatever it is, and then to keep them going, because there's so many different things that can pull them away. And clearly we know that in that stat of 1 in 3 that they are being pulled away and not returning. And it could also be maybe just the right coaching. I think that, when you sign on board to coach at a young level, at an introductory level, it has to be a special kind of coach and a special kind of person, as opposed to once we make it up to the more advanced levels. And I think that also plays a part too in, bringing people back and reeling them in. So that kind of segues pretty much into the next question, because how can we talk about representation for those girls who may not have parents who are or were involved in sports? And I kind of talked about that earlier, because that's a prime example of my story personally. At the end of the day, I am an athlete through and through. I really have to give credit to, although my grandparents raised me, it was really my dad who introduced me to sport. He was the one that put the tennis racket in my hand. He was the one that taught me hand-eye coordination, swinging a bat and a ball, and all of those things from a very, very young age. But like I said, being raised by my grandparents who didn't know anything about sports. And so like, I'm dragging them to my track and field meets. I begged them to put a basketball net on our driveway, begged them. There's just so many different things because it was a cultural and it was also a generational gap. So, and as an adult now, I totally see that and I understand that. So how do we, still put that drive or put that passion into young girls who may not see sports day in, day out in their homes?
I'm going to jump in on this one, Kayla. My husband and I both come from sports, so we put our two daughters into everything. And then I had one of my daughters who said, "But I want to dance. I don't want to do sport." Anyway, she did go down the dance pathway, which is great, which is totally new to us. So, we did the opposite. We were going into something that we had no idea about, but of course we're open to it. So when I think of one of the most successful programs we've hosted in our building was a group of local high school, and they're called the Pink Panthers. And there's a high Muslim community in the area that we are. We're at Morningside and 401. Our building is really unique because it's high performance. It's the City of Toronto and it's the University of Toronto Scarborough. So really great diversity of people that come here. So the Pink Panthers is a group. So we sort of hosted the the teaching kitchen piece of, learning how to cook, learning how to fuel for, it was like performance, or just, that basic education on when it came to nutrition. And we did a few others. But what was really important was that the parents came too. So it was really, so that you could have those conversations and that they were with, it was a large group of girls, probably 20. And we've done this a couple of times now, not since COVID. We'll get back to that. But we thought, we had so many questions from the parents and just about getting involved. And then they went into the gym and they did an activity. So I think it is like, you talked about is the education of parents and bringing them on board and all along, especially when they're not from sport families. Especially with girls, like a lot of boys we see get involved because that's how they want their kids, if they're new Canadians, to assimilate into the country. So they'll put them into sport. Not always the case with girls. So any opportunities that we can think of, the Try It days Michelle was talking about, are really, really important initiatives for all of us to be thinking about.
I will jump in on that as well. Deb makes a great point. It's and again, to my earlier comment around space, one of my roles is also creating facilities across the country at the community, grassroots, as well as the regional and national levels. And we are going to experience it this week where we're working with a foundation to actually create a new facility in an underserved area of Toronto. And the purpose of that is that foundation, ourselves, the donors, and even the corporate partners involved are all going to have a role to play, because some of those families actually don't have time. The parents or guardians are not able to go and drive kids everywhere and take them to sport. So we're creating before and after school programs at this facility, a homework club. So please make sure you think about different things and not just your sport. So how to bring people to your sport that can achieve the other goals or the necessities that they need to do to get through a day or a week or a school day. So homework clubs, those kinds of things. And we're going to make sure that organization will have women represented there as young youth leaders, bringing up the other youth that are participating to role model for them in case they don't have that at home. We're also going to have homework clubs, so to make sure they get their work done. There's snacks, there's those kinds of things. So I think we need to think about it. If there's not maybe necessarily every home that has financial means, two parents, one parent, no parent, you've got to consider the diversity of family styles, economic status, and make sure, what are we doing to make everything available if we can? And that's where the partnerships come in, right? Not every sport organization has the capacity to do this, but you can do it with partners.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing is some of those parents that have never been involved in sport, some of the women haven't had the opportunity to be involved, and maybe there's an opportunity for them to get in sport too, and the entire family get engaged. We've certainly in the women's hockey, we have a lot of adult women's hockey, and it's a lifelong experience. And we've had a lot of new people, new women that didn't know they could play, come into the game and absolutely love it. And then their kids sign up as well. It's a multi-pronged approach.
Mhm. I'm glad I heard both Fran and Anita, you touched on the financial element as well, because I think that obviously you can't have this discussion without also bringing that in, this idea of, okay, maybe it's not a lack of support, or it's not a lack of interest, but maybe perhaps it's also a lack of financial resources. And that's fair. I mean, when you look across the board, there are certain sports that are more easily accessible than others. Others require a bit more of a financial commitment. And perhaps that's where we also might see a decline. But I think, like you said, with collaboration through partnerships, being able to make it a little more easier for some, for girls who perhaps don't have those things at the accessible, like Michelle mentioned, tennis rackets were probably a hot item. Absolutely. Or perhaps golf clubs are not something that just everyone has in their closet, that they're not that they're afforded, but how fantastic would be to continue to see young girls in the game of golf. So I think that that's obviously a very important element to have as far as when we're discussing keeping interest, but also keeping in mind financial status when it comes to these young girls and families in general. So
I would just add to that, Kayla, we all know about Kids Sport and Jumpstart are very good for supporting financially for families. But I think Anita's point about collaborating with partners is a critical one, because sometimes the financial barrier is more than just registration costs. It is travel, it is meals, it is time to do homework. And so anytime you can partner, have multiple people share the load of a program, then there's more that you can offer. And it's not just the girls, it's the boys too. There's a lot of kids out there who need more support, and the more people you can have work with you, I think the more successful we can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to, I'm trying to be mindful of timing. And now that we're at 9:45, I do believe this is the part where we want to have an open mic discussion. If that's okay. I believe, Bianca, do you want to open up the microphone for anyone who may have a question?
So if anyone has a question, if you just want to kind of raise your hand, I'll open up your mic for you.
Okay.
In the meantime, we did get a question on the portal. We were asked, is there a league organization that you feel is properly operating how women sports should be presented?
Good question.
I guess from a team sport perspective, the OWHA is a women's sports organization. We have teams from players from 4 years old to about 84 years old. And, we find that the focus of 100% focus on the women's game, you're not debating what finances go to the co-ed team, what finances go to the women. We find that is a very, very good model and servicing the uniqueness of the game and embracing the differences.
I would say this past weekend, we hosted here at the college the OCAA Women's Basketball Championships. And not to brag, but I think it was pretty good. We have an incredible broadcast program here that loves to partner with us. So our production had 10 cameras in the gym to produce our webcast. We had an umpteen number of draws and prizes, and our table crew was stellar. I think my team here put on a great show for those young women. It was fun, and the community embraced it. And I think that as long as you look at these things open-minded and you don't consider whether it's men or women, you're just putting on the best show you can be successful.
I will just quickly jump in on that. I don't have one to showcase. But I will say in our learning and our research, it really helps to take the time. There are so many resources out there for girls and women, not just in Canada, but internationally. And take the time to look at what your provincial territorial colleagues are doing, or what one municipality might be doing, or one league, and then expand that to an international research. We learned a lot from looking at other countries, other federations. And I know it seems like an onerous task, but if there's a small group of you and you take a few hours and some homework and come back in for another few hours, you can actually learn a lot. So I would just say maybe just take some time as well to do research.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we have a question.
Yeah, so we have in the chat from Candace, what about the financial barriers for these families? Going back to one of the last questions. If anyone wants to take that,
I think we already answered it.
we're good. And then from,
There's a
Hi,
hand
Sarah.
up. Bianca, there's a hand up.
Yep, I'm just gonna get the one in the chat and then I'll get to Melissa. Kendra said, I noticed that men seem to be still thriving and being taken seriously past the age of 60, while women have disappeared or are being dismissed. What can we do to stay in these roles when we still feel we have work left to do? Ideas.
Can you say the beginning part of that, please?
Yeah.
I noticed that men seem to be still thriving and being taken seriously past the age of 60, while women have disappeared or are being dismissed. What can we do to stay in these roles when we still feel work left to do at the older ages?
Right. One comment, like, don't leave.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
And maybe the barriers you're experiencing are harder to sustain, and therefore you feel you have to go. But it's you've got to surround yourself. Like, I can see you can get tired and you can get worn down fast. A lot of people on this panel have been talking about this for longer than they wish to. But yeah, don't leave, don't get worn down, and bring in a more diverse group. So go beyond your generation and say, listen, this is what we've tried. This is, what the path we've paved, but there's more to do. Don't give up.
I
I
agree.
would also suggest you got to work on your own succession plan. So let's make sure we're all inviting younger women in, because, hey, by that theory of 60, then I'm done in a year and a half. So let's make sure we're opening the doors for the young ones and dragging them along. There's a lot of young women on this call.
Yeah. And I, going back to the original question, I really think there's a lot of committees, boards, and opportunities that you can be involved in, right? Let's face it, our sports system is a volunteer-based sports system, and all that tacit knowledge that you've learned can really be transferred to any committee or any board or any league that you may want to start up. So as we've said, stay involved.
Okay, so I'm gonna open the mic for Melissa here. Melissa, you should be able to unmute now.
I can. Good morning, everyone, and I'm really enjoying the wealth of knowledge on this call. So thanks to all the panelists here. I hate to bring up a bit of a controversial topic, and I'm hoping that people will be comfortable to talk about it, but what are our thoughts on the emergence of the transgender and non-binary athletes who are starting to come in, particularly the ones that were identified male at birth, but now want to participate in female sports? I'm all for being inclusive and diverse, but I worry that this could be a hindrance for women in sport if they feel uncomfortable with their ability to participate on women's sports and be in their locker rooms and things like that. Like, do we have any thoughts on how we could address that, or how might be the best way to deal with that situation?
I can I can jump in, not my area of expertise, I'm building facilities. But my experience in sport, I think it's an evolution. So there's a lot that we don't know, we're learning. I think the majority of organizations are starting to put policies in place to try and understand the diversity of participant better. I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a positive. We're always complaining. We only have one type of person in sport, it's whatever, it looks like this. We need to expand the diversity of our sports. I think we know we can look to research, international and Canadian research that points to a lot of the myths being taken away on this topic as far as advantage and disadvantages. And I think it becomes, and thank you for raising it, because I think the important part is it becomes an open dialogue. And the more we talk about it, the more we learn about it, the more we reframe it. Because if we don't have facts and we don't understand the research, or even the people that are identifying as women or men, we need to have them at the table to discuss their experiences and how this impacts their sport experience. So I think we are better with a much richer sport experience if we're open to the dialogue and evolve as a community.
And agree with Anita, we do have people from the various on the gender spectrum in our program, and we're continuing to follow the research and the experts and want to make sure that we're fair to people.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm certainly no expert either, and I think Anita's answer was very good.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm proud about the OCAA is we are very inclusive, and we have some transgendered athletes that are competing, and I think we're just more inclusive and a better community for it.
Well said by my colleagues.
Okay, so we're going to do one more question just to wrap up. So this will be the last question. It's for Fran. Have you seen a positive impact of the city of TO Rinks offering dedicated weekly women's hockey shinny hours? Is that a model to be replicated in other sports at city venues to keep women in the game? Is it helping?
Where were those rinks, Bianca?
In the city of Toronto. Seems to be offering dedicated weekly.
Ice time continues to be in various areas a situation where we're looking for equity, not just in the amount of ice, the quality of the facilities and the actual timing of the facilities. It is getting better in Toronto, but we still find a lot of our associations have to buy a lot of private ice, which is much more expensive than the public ice. So it continues to be a situation that is evolving, not just in Ontario, but throughout Canada as well, and other countries.
So Bianca, I believe that was the last question, correct?
Yeah, so back
Okay.
to you.
So thank you. So before we go into the raffle winners and we wrap everything up, I did want to, I know I'm being mindful of the clock, but 30 seconds or under. This is our last question to all of the panelists this morning. What is one piece of advice that you have been given or you have received that you would like to pass on as we conclude today's conversation to our attendees this morning?
Be social and be positive.
I would say find a mentor, whether it's male or female, someone that can really support you and help you, someone that you can talk things through. And, as we talked about that succession planning thing, work on that with you as well.
I would say ask. Ask your way out of when you hit barriers. Ask your allies, whether they're men or women. Ask for help. As we've discussed, tap people on the shoulder, ask them to participate with you if they feel they need an invitation. I think continue to be curious about why you think something's going wrong or going right, and be curious about it and ask, and that will give us deeper, richer results.
So be kind to yourself and surround yourself with positive people, and don't hesitate to reach out to them, but really be kind to yourself.
Okay, great advice. Thank you to each and every one of you for this just a wealth of knowledge and really just a great conversation this morning. I think it's safe to say that everyone kind of was able to take a tidbit, a piece of wisdom, a nugget of knowledge from this conversation today. So thank each and every one of you on the panel for joining this morning. And that does conclude the question period and panel discussion for today. But as we mentioned at the very beginning, we have the OSN swag bags that we would want to give away through the raffle. So I do have the names that were randomly selected. They were given to me here on the side. So I'm going to go ahead and announce the raffle winners for the OSN swag bag. They are Kamaran, excuse me if I said that wrong, Kamaran Rahimi, Heather Bruce, Trish McNeil, Vanessa Lodge, Michael Colley, Cindy Clapp, Michaela Tyrell, Laura Ray, Larissa McFadden, and Coach John Leader. So if you heard your name, congratulations, you won one of the OSN swag bags. And so as far as how you'll receive the bag, I'm sure Bianca and team will be in touch. Yes, Bianca? Yep. Okay, great. So yeah, congratulations on your OSN swag bag. And that concludes everything. But before I hand it back to the OSN team, again, I want to just thank the panel truly for your insight today, for being here, for just engaging and having this conversation, as we continue to slowly move the dial forward when it comes to women in sport, and just how it just is a reminder of how important your work is on a day-to-day basis. So continue to keep the good fight. And with that, I'll hand it back to Patsy to wrap things up.
Thank you, Kayla. Thank you to all of our attendees for sharing your morning with us. Thank you, Kayla, again, and to our incredible OSN board, Fran, Debbie, Anita, and Michelle, and of course to incredible team, Bianca and Sharon, for developing this event. I guess one thing that really resonated is just let's continue to uplift and inspire and empower and connect one another. So as Anita, said earlier, that equity is not even a thing that we're discussing or trying to solve. And let's just think of our next generation. Follow us on social and our websites. We will be hosting another event. I believe it will be in person in May. The topic is business development and sponsorship. So more information to come on that. And really just want to wish everyone a wonderful, happy International Women's Day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Kayla, for moderating.
Yeah, thanks, Kayla.
Thanks, Kayla. Great job.
Pleasure.